Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Secretary. It's great to see you again. Thank you for being here. I'm going to bring our conversation back to what I think is really the critical issue of housing supply. I had the honor in the last Congress to chair the Committee on Economic Disparity and Fairness and Growth. My ranking member was Brian Stile. I'm going to give you a copy of our report here. I would tell you that, thinking about economic disparity, we really identified two things that could move the needle in a huge way. One of those was childcare, more readily available. The other one was housing supply. And in your testimony, you said you gave what felt like a low estimate, $1.5 million for the deficit in housing in this country. We actually quoted a $3.8 million 2020 deficit, which was a Freddie Mac estimate. So clearly we have a huge problem here, and I want to limit my observations and questions to what I think is the most powerful tool for addressing supply, and that is the low-income housing tax credit. There's so much we could talk about, but I really want to focus on that, because I actually see it working in a small way in my district. In Stanford, we have a fabulous development called Metro Green, which is not just LEED certified, but it was a magnificent LIHTC property, transportation-oriented. It's a stone's throw from the train station. It actually adds, and this is an important point, it adds sort of attractiveness to the neighborhood. One of the challenges I think we have is that a lot of Americans, when they think affordable housing or public housing, they're thinking of the public housing of the 1950s and the 1960s, which of course is not the way we do low-income housing today. But to come back around to the low-income housing tax credit, let me start with this question. I'm not sure what the deficit is. Let's just say 2 million units. Do you have an estimate for how much of that will need to be subsidized? What I mean by that is obviously the private sector is going to close some of that gap with the construction that's ongoing today. Does HUD have an estimate for whether it's 2 million or 3 million or 1.5, what percentage of new units, new housing will need to be subsidized in some form?
If it's affordable housing, all of them will need probably some support. When you think about the fact that the margins are so small when you are building low-income or affordable housing, most of it needs to be subsidized in some way or assisted in some way. That's why we are asking Treasury to reconsider the amount of low-income housing tax credits they provide and the caps that are on them today, as well as more 9% so that states can do bigger projects and more of them.
Yeah, and I would observe, and we documented in the report from the Committee on Economic Disparity, there's actually bipartisan support for augmenting the LIHTC program. I'm looking at some data here, which is HUD data that I think shows the number of LIHTC units placed in service. And as I look back over the last 5 or 6 years, that number is sort of 90,000 units placed in service a year associated with LIHTC. There's a dip in 21 to 46,000 units. That's obviously, I think, COVID related. Do you know where we are in terms of 22 and 23? Are we seeing an uptick in LIHTC units placed in service in the last couple of years?
Oh, absolutely, because much more housing is being built today.
Do you know what the numbers are for 22 and 23?
I don't, but I
can. Great, I don't expect you to know them off the top of your head, but if we could get those. So it feels to me like we've got to augment that program, because it is really the program that moves the needle in the biggest way. And it seems to me we need to make more flexible that program so that you can do mixed income, mixed use in one building. Let me give you the last minute of my time to suggest to us how we might in statute do those two things, more and more flexible LIHTC.
Let me first just be clear that everybody understands that LIHTC is actually a Treasury program. It is not a HUD program. But we do implement it on our end. And so what I would suggest that you do is have a conversation with the Treasury Secretary and her team as to how we can encourage, because we want it. We already believe that the program should be bigger, because that is one of the few things that is helpful to large developers or developers who want to build low-income or moderate-income pricing. That and the Housing Trust Fund, which is for, of course, the lowest income brackets in our nation. But we can together, I think, talk with Treasury about making the program not only just more flexible, but making the program bigger. Because right now there are too many restrictions on the state level for the program. So we get calls from states all the time saying, can you do this? And I say, well, I can't do it, you gotta go to Treasury. So I think maybe it would be a great idea for us all to sit down and figure out what Treasury can do with our help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.